Welcome to another episode of Holistic Health Habits, the podcast where we explore the latest trends and innovations in holistic health and wellness. I'm your host, Surani Fernando, and today our expert guest is Elle Russ. Elle is the founder of her own pioneering company in the field of holistic health. She's a renowned health coach, author, and thyroid expert, and she's here to share her incredible story and expertise with us. Welcome to the show, Elle.
Hi, thanks for having me. Important topic. Everyone
Yeah.
wants to know how they can get healthier and live a better life. So I'm glad we're
Yeah.
here. Thanks for inviting me.
Exactly. Great to have you here. So firstly, I was reading a little bit on your website and you've got an incredibly colorful journey that's led you to where you are today. Lots of twists and turns, but I was wondering if you can maybe share some of the key moments that shaped your decision to get into the holistic health space.
Sure. Back when I was in my late 20s, well, first of all, the first thing that happened to me in life that was a health thing is that I had a permanent hand-arm disability. I still have it. I have chronic tendonitis in both of my hands. I got this from a career in corporate technology, just like 100 miles an hour on
Okay.
the computer.
Yeah.
So, the golden handcuffs were cut off of me, and that is a health thing. That's inflammation. I was in chronic pain for at least a year. And so it kind of started with that. I was so in pain. I was searching for answers, and this was 1997. No, but there were no podcasts. Google wasn't a thing. It just was not even a thing. So you're looking around, you're trying to find stuff. The only person out there was like Dr. Andrew Weil. Do you remember Dr. Andrew Weil? He
I
looks like Santa.
don't.
He's very famous. He looks like Santa Claus. He's got like a big gray beard. And he
Okay.
came out with a book called like Optimal Health. And he had like a meditation CD. And I'll tell you, Sarani, it was the only thing that like helped me, that felt like I had somebody by my side. And like I listened to this and my arms would be on fire. I couldn't even like go like that without pain or wipe myself without pain or hold a fork in my mouth. That was
Yeah.
my first introduction into like, oh, he was like, hey, anti-inflammatory, olive oil, fish. He was the pioneer beginning one of like anti-inflammatory, and then also had that meditation sort of CD on wellness. And I ended up interviewing him like 20 something years later, and I cried because I remember like he was my buddy. He was the only thing I had then. So that's when I
Mhm.
started to look into certain things. I started to exercise for circulation flow, but I couldn't do anything with my arms. So I would like rollerblade or swim with a snorkel and a mask. And I started to kind of go along. I always sort of knew how to eat healthy. My parents were pretty healthy and cooked full meals. That
Yeah.
was my first foray into it. Then I got disabled from my job. I'm like, oh my God, I only have my voice. There wasn't YouTube or podcasts, right? So I went back to traditional acting school because I was like, there's no other way to do this. And while I'm doing that, I'm like, okay, if I'm going to be on TV and film, and it's better now, but I was like, I've got to be fit, right? Like, I
Mhm.
gotta look like a leading lady here. I'm 27 and blonde, right? Like I got to fit this mold.
Right.
And here started what I now realize in hindsight was on the wrong eating paradigm, over exercising, which is a total nightmare. And I
Mhm.
really probably overexercised myself into a state where then I became hypothyroid. And because of my journey, it's like your test becomes your testimony. A lot of health authors, we went through something, no one helped us. The only reason I got better from hypothyroidism, I went to over 2 dozen endocrinologists in Los Angeles. It was through my perseverance and my own determination. I solved it myself. I actually dosed myself with thyroid hormones. I don't have an MD. I shouldn't have been in that situation. So through
Right.
that perseverance and awful story, I was like, how are people in like Nebraska or other parts of the world dealing with this if I'm in Los Angeles and I've got great insurance and access to like the most amazing experts and they can't help me? So that
Yeah.
led to a deep dive, right? And thus came, my foray into paleo-primal ancestral evolutionary health, which I do believe is the ultimate foundation, and you can make adjustments from there. So I'll just leave it at that and see, what you might want to ask from here. Or yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting what you said about the over exercising part of it, which I don't think a lot of people realize how damaging that can be when you're just, especially coming from, you mentioned going into acting, I guess in the 90s, I remember what it was like to grow up in the 90s and trying to fit a certain mold. But I also had an experience where maybe about 8 years ago, and I discussed this on another episode, that, the whole thing of like, if you want to get fit and lose weight, you just got to pound pounded at the gym, the running, the sprinting, the weights, everything. But I actually felt in 1 month my body super inflamed because I had just stepped up what I was doing on an exponential level. I felt like irritable. I felt, I mean, I looked and felt fatter. I felt heavier. And when I tell people about that time in my life where I had this 1 month of this gym pass that I had gotten, and I just got really addicted to exercising, people don't understand. They're like, but if you were exercising, then you're burning calories and you should just be slim. You shouldn't be getting fat. So yeah. And I think, I don't think that I had a thyroid issue, but that, it possibly could have led there.
It could have led there, so I want people to understand this because what you're talking about is like no pain, no gain, and you're talking about what we refer to in the paleo industry as chronic cardio.
Hmm.
Okay. So this paradigm of, okay, here's the wrong paradigm that everyone got wrong and experts and scientists know now. But in the past, it was like glucose is our primary fuel, which is wrong. But that was and so from that came I'm sure people remember back in the day, if you've been alive that long, like runners and marathons, the whole thing was like eat pasta the night before, load up on bread, right? It was all carbs, all
Right.
glucose. This was the paradigm. You store yourself up with all this stuff, then you go on the run and you're burning it. This is a problem. And the reason it's a problem is because our bodies actually don't primarily want to run on glucose. We want it to be fat and some glucose. And so when you are on this paradigm, you're on a hamster wheel to nowhere. And here's the hamster wheel. You eat the carbs because you think that's what's supposed to fuel you. You can only store so much, only 200 grams in all of the organs. So then you go do a glycolytic workout, meaning you're working out at whatever 185 minus your age is, whatever that number
Hmm.
is. If you go over that in heart rate, you are now in a glucose burning. So you eat all these carbs, then you're like chronic cardio. Now you've just depleted them. And then after the workout, what are you craving? Carbs. You're tired and you need carbs and whatever. The switch, the primal switch is no, no, no. We want to turn our genetic switches to go back to what we were really designed, our DNA as human being was to draw from all of the areas, right?
Yeah.
But we don't want to be primary glucose. Why? Everybody listening knows type 2 diabetes. Look at the diabetes obesity epidemic. That's carb driven. Do you know how you cure type 2 diabetes? You go low carb. There's only one way to fix that naturally. Okay. So we just got it wrong. The 80s was like no fat, eat pasta and chicken
Right.
breast, right? And then a lot of people that come to me are bikini body competitors because they are doing like the chicken breast and the broccoli. There's not a lot of fat.
Hmm.
Our cells need fat. The reason lifelong or childhood vegetarians or vegans have delayed menstruation is because they're not getting enough cholesterol. And
Right.
so that's the problem. Like fat was vilified, that was a problem. Then it became, oh no, no, we want to do high carb. The best paradigm is what is aligned with our DNA. What is that? It's pretty much a high or moderate fat paradigm with high protein or moderate protein and lower carb. What do I mean by low carb? Everyone's got to look at their day, okay? Unless you are an athlete, and I mean like an NBA athlete, not like you go running every day for 2 hours. Unless you're
Yeah.
an athlete or like a bricklayer, you really shouldn't go above 150 grams total of carbs every day. Most people are at 300 or more. That's why we have insulin resistance. That's why you
Hmm.
have type 2 diabetes. So,
Okay.
right. So, how do you look at it? Well, you need to start to look at your food because one bunch of asparagus cooked is 20 carbs, but asparagus is good for you. That's not bad. It's
Right.
still carbs though. So if
Yeah.
you're going to drink the green juice and that's 26 carbs of your day of 150 or 120, I'm 5 feet 2 inches tall. I'm a small woman. If I ate 150 carbs every single day, that might not work out for me. So maybe I need to go a little bit less. The key is to kind of be flexible with it. So the way that you would start out, as I say, don't diet, don't restrict. You just get rid of the offensive things like bad seed oils. You switch them for good fats. Of course, we take the packaging out, eat bacon burgers, whatever you want, but just look at your carbs. I'd rather have people overeat protein and fat a little bit at first and start to manage those carbs. You know, a pint of blueberries is 14. A huge baked potato is 64 grams. So in a day, you know, and just start to gauge that. Where are you kind of wasting carbs? And then people go, well, I don't have a sweet tooth. And I go, do you eat breads and chips and things like that? That is sugar.
Right.
People need to realize that the body doesn't know the difference between 3 slices of sugared mango from Trader Joe's or a Coca-Cola. They both have 38 grams of carbs. Now, one's a better choice, clearly, but it does the same thing. So the reason you get like fatter and you keep working out, you're on this hamster wheel, is you're never giving your body a chance to pull from your fat stores. It's too busy
Right.
burning the glucose, refueling the glucose, burning the
Right.
glucose. When you get primal and fat adapted, as we say, and you switch this over, it can take about 21 days. What you start to notice is what I noticed. I was hauling ass up the mountain, right? The harder, the faster, the more I sweat, the better the weight, right? But then I'd be afterwards tired, sore, hungry. So then I switched to the paradigm, which was let's go at a pace 180 minus my age, a little lower. The hike felt a little slower, but you know what, Surani? It was more enjoyable. Okay. You know, it was way more
Right.
enjoyable. I was just taking my time. And then I got back down. I wasn't hungry, didn't need to eat right away. I wasn't fat and bloated later. I was lit up in the brain. And so if we look at our hunter-gatherer ancestors, we have the same DNA as 50,000 year ago wandering hunter-gatherers. This would have been a recipe for death if they were like sugar burners versus fat burners. Because at hour 5, when the sugar drops and now they're like, oh, I'm tired, I'm hangry, they would have all been prey. They
Yeah.
wouldn't have run up to the top of the hill because they had all the time in the world. They wouldn't have
Right.
exhausted themselves. It was more of a natural, like, hey, take your time. So this whole, let me get on the bike, sweat it out, pump it out. And then another thing that my former mentor Mark Sisson talks about is people at the gym and they're on the cycle and you go up to me, oh, what are you training for? And they're like, I just like to eat.
Mm.
And here's why this is like a really bad paradigm to have. You're spending all this stress for what, a few extra bites of something you really shouldn't be having anyway. When you become fat adapted, you don't need to work out every day to maintain your weight loss because you're not on the hamster wheel, because you didn't fuel, burn, fuel, burn. You just fueled enough. Right. And so I hope that makes sense. And if there's anything that I can clarify about that, what I would say is how do you know you're a sugar burner? If you cannot go 4, 8, 24 hours without food and not have a hangry meltdown, you are not, you are definitely a sugar burner. It is it's like 10:30 a.m. where I live right now. I have
Yeah.
not had any food. I've been up since 6. I'm fine. If I didn't have any food for the next day, I'd actually be fine. I wouldn't be, because I'm fat adapted. My brain is going to go, uh-oh, and start to fuel my body with my fat reserves.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's something actually I've started doing, really paying more attention. And we can also talk about this, how you guide men versus women, but I've
Mhm.
been doing, learning a lot about how we don't really talk about women and our cycles and when certain hormones need certain nutrients and when they don't need certain nutrients. And yeah, I've been doing 36-hour fast once a month in at the beginning of my cycle, following a specific nutritionist advice. And I have to say, like, it is incredible the amount of energy that I get from that. Like, just doing that once a month, it's like a detox, a cleanse. Obviously, making sure the other moments of my month that I'm nourishing myself, eating well. I have to say that I've been more prioritizing in terms of the counting, because I find counting quite difficult, but just realizing that I'm definitely not eating enough protein, that or the protein amount that I used to think, oh yeah, add this as your protein, it would be just probably a third of what I should be eating, because I'm also trying to change my body composition. Like, I'm getting
Yep.
older, I want to build muscle, protect my bones. So yeah, I think there
It's a
is
very good
something.
point.
Yeah.
People really,
Yeah.
especially when you reach 40 or above, or even so, you have to. My friend Elizabeth Resnick, who's happy, healthy, and hot on Instagram, and she's 57, and she's killing it. And she's always like, "You prioritize protein and produce." It got tough for me. I used to eat a lot of protein. Then somehow I realized, oh my God, I don't even think I'm eating enough, like half the amount. So when you prioritize protein, protein is so satiating. And if you
Mhm.
are coming off of being a sugar addict, which is, look, it's tough. I've been there. Um, what I always suggest is look, like stick with some like non-crappy dessert choices like fruit and whipped cream, right? Fruit, whipped cream and nuts, or you know what I mean? Like something like that. And eat that every day until don't eat the Twinkies. And it'll train your palate because those blueberries won't be sweet enough at first. But then later on, you're like, I don't even think I need the whipped cream. So
Right.
it's like also retraining your palate. The protein satiates you, and then if you eat it first, you're less likely to make crappy choices. So if you go to a smorgasbord party and it's like cheese and all this stuff, you're like, oh my God, I don't want to, it's so
Yeah.
tempting. Go for the meat first. Like get meat in your body immediately.
Hmm.
I naturally intermittent fast, just because I'm not a morning eater, but I honor my hunger when it does come up. The other day, I woke up at 4 a.m. for something. So I was hungrier earlier, and it was not a time of day that I prefer to eat. But I'm not going
Hmm.
to go, I'm a person that fasts until I go, no, hold on a minute. My body wants a sausage right now. Eat the fucking sausage. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whatever your plan is, go with it and honor your hunger. If you're not hungry for 5 hours, then don't eat.
Right.
My issue is that I like to eat my main dinner at like 3 o'clock. Well, whose life does that work with? Not a lot of people. So I have to make adjustments for that sometimes if people want to go out to dinner at a certain time. But in general, I also honor that. Guess what? I'm not going to adjust my schedule to everyone else. I'm eating at frickin' 3, you know,
Right.
most of the time. Like I'm going to eat when I want to eat. And I don't care. I'm not going to suffer for 3 hours because I'm waiting for everyone in the house to have their dinner at 6. I
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
occasionally. I'll not suffer, but I'll gauge it, right? I'll throw some meat, I'll do a snack in between to hold off for that dinner. It's just that your times may change as you go through this. I don't recommend intermittent fasting if you've like never done it and never gotten fat adapted. I'd recommend getting on a paleo-primal, get out of sugar burning, get into fat adapting, and then once you're there, you can like really get down a little bit deeper.
Hmm. And with your eating cycles, or
Oh
your
yeah.
eating patterns, do you like are guiding your clients with this? Is it how important is a woman's cycle with that? Because when you were saying about I honor my hunger, I feel like I'm doing that now. I didn't understand before why. Like if you had asked me maybe 10 years ago to stop eating at 6 p.m., I'm a late eater. I like, I live in Spain now, so that fits perfectly for me. But I would have been like, no way, like I could not do that. I'm just going to wake up hungry. The one time I didn't eat enough for dinner, I woke up and I slept, like sort of was sleepwalking, and I ate a plum. I just opened the fridge, there was something there, and I was eating a plum, like basically sleeping.
Yeah.
But now I kind of understand that it's kind of very much dependent on my cycle. And like that
Yes.
week before, like I'm
The week
just
before you
I
have
won't, yeah,
cravings, right? Or there might be something
cravings.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I've learned to feed myself more of like the good carbs, and really feeding myself those carby sort of things, but obviously avoiding sugary, processed, fried, whatever, especially fried if I'm out. There's a lot of fried food here in Spain that becomes a little bit difficult. But then in the beginning of my cycle, I noticed that I'm very strong.
Yep,
I'm
me
not
too.
as hungry. So how, like, and I think that this is more new. I don't know if you're
Well, actually, do
familiar
you
with.
know Elisa Vitti? Do you know who Elisa Vitti is? Because I interviewed her years ago. If you go to flowliving.com and it's just FLO, her whole
Yeah.
thing is about exactly what exercises and things you should and shouldn't be doing at certain types of your cycle.
Right.
And I could be getting this wrong, but it was something to the effect of like, in the week leading up to your period, that's no time for cardio, that's weightlifting, right? Like she goes through
Right.
that. So that's an interesting concept. There are people that swear by that. I haven't done anything, quote, different with the exercise part, meaning I do
Hmm.
what I do, and I don't change it for, like, oh, I just lift weights in the second half.
Yeah.
But when the cravings come up, there's a couple things. One of the reasons is women out there, if you don't know, if you're craving chocolate, it's usually because of the magnesium. So you know what I
Hmm.
mean? You can get some magnesium in there. That's good for muscle relaxation, sleep. I also can find that there can be some constipation naturally around, like ovulation, like just around this weird time. I'll notice like, oh, and so then I go, okay, hey, be careful extra what you eat so you won't have any trouble, and I don't have any bowel issues at all. I'm totally regular, but I just kind of noticed, oh, things are a little off around there. So it's like you have to have this awareness, what's happening with you. So when you're craving that stuff before your period, I will carb up. I absolutely will eat carbs, but they're going to be good carbs. If I
Hmm.
really want to be bad, I would eat a gluten-free thing. So if I'm gonna have pasta, I'll eat gluten-free pasta. So I'm still going to make the better choice for that, even though I would say, of course, I'm a don't eat grains, beans, and legumes and dairy, and paleo-primal is great. But again, if you want something, it's satisfying to the brain and everything, and you need a carby thing or you need that texture, sure, you could also go to, cauliflower, pasta, rice. There's all sorts of other options. So I just honor it. I think before it's overboard, you're going for Twinkies and donuts. I really try to stay away from that. That doesn't mean that I don't ever not have a donut. I want people to know you live your, now, if I had an autoimmune disease, I wouldn't eat gluten at all, ever, but I don't. So I occasionally will. It's what can you get away with for you?
Yeah.
For some people it's 2 bites, and then after that, that's the end of it. For me, I've got a sensitivity to garlic. Like I can eat a little bit in something or a garlic powder in something, but if there's a like then I'm ruined. I know my limits, so I got to kind of gauge that, with
Yeah.
food. And it's the same
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
with anyone else, with anything else. We all know if anyone did this experiment, if you just ate a bowl of pasta for lunch, you are going to want to be asleep by 2.
Hmm.
All you did was jack yourself up and now you're down. What we want to do, and I guess this is the best way to explain the difference between sugar burning and fat burning, and this sort of comes from the Keto Reset Diet written by Mark Sisson and Brad Kearns, my mentors. You think of fat as like the oak log on the fire. It's going to burn slow and low and long, not a lot of flames, not a lot of smoke. This thing's steady. That's fat. That's running on a high fat, moderate protein, low carb paradigm, or moderate protein, moderate fat, low carb. When you're a sugar burner, it's like throwing newspaper onto the fire. It burns real quick, bunch of smoke, and you're done. What's the smoke? Oxidative bad stuff going on there, right? So that's the idea. You want to go steady. When you're fat adapted, you're going strong. You don't get food, you're still fine. You're still fine. If a sugar burner doesn't get food, you're having a hangry meltdown. And
Yeah.
one of the biggest success, all of the success stories from getting fat adapted are usually this. You get the calls. I remember when one of my friends did it at first. They called me and they're like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. I just woke up, went to the airport, took a 6-hour flight to New York. Normally I'd have to take snacks with me, nuts, something, but I'd be dying midway through the flight. I was fine by the time. That was a total of 10. Yeah. Yeah. I did a hack once. I was going to Hawaii, had to get up very early, fly there, and then drive somewhere. And so I knew the whole ordeal was going to be like 8 hours. It was in the morning. I was not hungry at all, by the way, at all. But as a medicinal biohack, I saw that they were serving like burgers over at the thing. I got a
Hmm.
meat patty with an egg on it, and I reluctantly ate it. I was not hungry. I
Okay.
reluctantly ate it because I knew that I was prepping myself for this. And I wasn't hungry until 9:30 that night in Hawaii. I left at like 5 a.m. in the morning. That sustained me for about 10 straight hours. So
Right.
sometimes it's advantageous to eat when you're not hungry if you know, right?
Yeah.
You got something going on. And the other time, and I'll just give this as an example, I was part of the Woolsey fire in 2018. It burned 100,000 acres in Malibu. I lived right in the middle of it.
Hmm.
Very stressful, horrible event. We're at the beach. We're all stranded. We can't go anywhere. And some firemen brought over like a box they had like taken from someone's house of their pantry. They're trying to feed people. And
Mm.
there was muffins and some bagels. And then there was a jar of peanut butter. Everybody ran and went for the carbs. And I was like, no, no, no. Now, in this moment, I knew likely I would survive and see like daylight and modern society the next day, but I also wasn't sure we were trapped at the beach. We were literally landlocked. So my primal mind was like in survival, like, oh, I gotta live here. I don't have any sustenance. I know I'm
Yeah.
gonna be okay because I'm in the modern world. I took the biggest scoop of that peanut butter. That's what'll sustain. Because see, I looked at that and I was like, no, no, you take that. That'll last your shit for days. Those carbs, no, you're gonna be sleeping in
Yeah.
2 hours. So
Right.
these are the kind of things like that. That was kind of an emergency situation. I doubt anyone's gonna be in that. But even in that moment, I made that conscious decision, Surani, knowing how that was going to affect me. That was based on my knowledge, my research, my book, everything that I do.
Yeah.
Would the bagel have been more fun and comforting in that moment? I'm sure, but that wasn't the point. It was like, hey, I need to survive. I don't know when I'm going to get food next. So let me
Right.
make the best choice here. And the best choice there was fat.
Right. And it's also, those bagels would have put you to sleep, but or at the same time make you more hungry, right? Like in
Suffer
like,
more.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
suffer more from being hangry and all of that, and the way that it
Yeah.
would affected my glucose. Instead, I was pretty much probably in ketosis the entire time I was going through that. which is
Right.
great.
Yeah.
Low inflammation, my brain's on fire, I'm alert, I'm in a troubling situation. You want to be alert. So those are just a few examples. Hopefully that all made sense. And if I can, add anything onto this or clear any nuances regarding this, I guess I would say, you're a sugar burner if you can't go 5, 4, 8 to 10 hours. If you're craving grains and carby stuff and sugar, that's usually a sign.
Yeah.
And you're fat adaptive if you can go without that and you don't have the hangry. When I was a sugar burner, I over-exercised and I ate a low-carb, low-fat paradigm, very detrimental. And I had
Hmm.
the hangry, sugar-burning, hypoglycemic meltdowns. And I would be literally just on a 45-minute drive from like Hollywood to Malibu, and I'd be so hangry, my brain would feel empty, like painful in there. And I would just be like dying. And I'd have to get off the highway, drive to a supermarket, and like run up to the counter and like get some meat, grab an apple. This is destructive. This is disruptive.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then to see that you can live another way. So I used to be a food addict. I thought I'd have to go to Overeaters Anonymous. I thought, is everyone thinking about food all the time like me and they're just not talking about it? I get it. And I'm here to tell you there's an end to it. And that is switching over your paradigm to
Hmm.
one that matches your DNA. No one has ever fried up a ribeye steak and given it to a horse. We don't do that because horses have their own DNA that expects certain things of them. The
Hmm.
only reason we're suffering right now, or you might be suffering with health, is partly due to you've gotten away from what your DNA expects of you. That's to eat
Yeah.
plants, animals. You don't have to eat red meat. You can eat fish and eggs. There's alternatives. But that's really the paleo-primal paradigm. And when people go, oh, it's a gimmick, eat like your ancestors, paleo-primal is not just an eating strategy. It's a lifestyle one because we talk about don't exercise that much over that heart rate. Maybe one sprint session a week. Otherwise, fat burn, right?
Hmm.
Lift heavy things, right?
Yeah.
Get sun, get sleep. But people will follow like a list of paleo foods and go, it's not working for me. I'm not getting fat adapted. And you're like, oh, are you still running 30 miles a week? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in
That people
order
don't
to,
realize how detrimental that part can be because they're just like, no, more, 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 more. Yeah, I need to do like these 2 hour workouts, heavy, heavy, heavy. And they don't realize that actually your body needs the opposite.
I used to suffer so much, Surani. I used to like have to go to the gym. I was always ahead, you're always like you're on the hamster wheel. You're taking 2 steps backwards. You're trying to get, you know what I mean? You eat the thing. Now you got to go work out. And it's not like that when you are fat adapted. You literally don't have to work out for a few days. You'll still maintain the same body weight because you have eliminated that dependency on glucose. All that
Hmm.
type 2 diabetes is a carbohydrate dependency. You have eaten yourself there. Now, sometimes it happens because of other things, but for the most part in our society, and it could be unbeknownst to them, I'm not blaming anyone. I also was headed towards type 2 diabetes at one point. I think everyone can be a victim of it,
Hmm.
but that's where you really do need to look at it. And for anyone really curious about that the blood test for that is the HbA1c test, and that is a
Hmm.
3-month glucose tolerance test. No matter what anyone says to you, 5.2 and below is what you want. So when it's at 5.7, you're pre-diabetic. When you're at 6, you've hit type 2 diabetes, okay? If you're at 5.7 and your doctor's like, it's fine, it's not. 5.2 and below. So athletes who are fat adapted, who are really good, have good body compositions, they're going to be at like a 4.8. 5.2 is fine. It's not a race of who can get below it. It's just that you want to be 5.2 or below. So that's a great marker. Insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, you can't lose weight, you're struggling, get that test. And then if that test sucks, carbs.
Okay.
Yeah, cut them, right? And
Yeah.
and get to a paleo primal paradigm. And life's so much more enjoyable when you don't feel like you have to work out every day or stress yourself out, be exhausted, or like you said, and I've been there too, your story about struggling through the hunger, like just sucking it up.
Yeah, definitely. And so when did you, I assume your thyroid issue is all controlled now.
Mhm.
And
I
when did that happen? And like, tell me about the
Sure.
initial diet that you sort of had, like a typical day, what you sort of ate.
You mean before I knew I had, like when I was suffering and didn't know
Yeah,
anything?
like so possibly like before that,
Mhm.
and then what you had to change and what that initial diet looked like, and also what it looks like now, because assuming that you're maintaining that, steady
Yeah.
paleo
So I do
primal
take
diet.
thyroid hormone replacement every day. So, but the dietary, but here's the thing. The only reason it works great and perfectly is because I have this primal fat adapted baseline to receive
Hmm.
it. Okay, so that's part of the reason behind the paleo-thyroid solution. It's not, oh, you got fat with hypothyroidism, eat paleo to lose weight. I mean, that's certainly part of it. But it's also about paleo-primal and what I just told you about how that works with, like, the fat being more of the predominant, fuel. Um, what you're doing there is you've got this trifecta of adrenal glands and like glucose and thyroid. In order for thyroid, whether your own hormones are being pumped out right or whether I'm swallowing them every day to save my life, they need to get to where they need to go. And the best environment for that is a fat adapted primal baseline. We also know that with Hashimoto's, the autoimmune disease that affects hypothyroid, that makes you hypothyroid,
Yeah.
100% gluten ignites the antibodies. So another argument for going grain-free and paleo. We also know gluten affects lots of autoimmune disorders. It's one of the immediate first best things you can do as a hack if you have an autoimmune disorder is to completely eliminate grains, but absolutely gluten. Okay, so my diet before, I was overworking out. So I was eating a low-fat, high-protein, low-carb paradigm. The low-fat part was probably the biggest problem, okay, because the high protein and the high fat would have been great. That's essentially keto or paleo, but
Yeah.
I wasn't getting enough fat, so my brain wasn't being satiated, and I was overworking out. So what did that look like? I would get up, I would go for about a 45-minute hike with a friend. Then we would go to the gym and lift weights. And then I would swim 36 laps every day. And you know
Okay.
what? I gained weight. And I'm like, well, how is this happening? It backfired at some point. At first, people would come up to me and be like, oh my God, what do you do at the gym? Right? Like, I mean, here's the thing. I had the body. I wasn't getting away with it on the back end. This is why we find so many pro athletes are like diabetic or headed towards diabetes. And they always go, wait. How did this happen? I work out every day. I run 20 miles. I'm an adventure racer. You know what I mean? Look at my
Yeah.
body. I look amazing. I'm on a magazine. And they're like, why is my insulin screwed up? Here's why. Because they wake up in the morning, they drink a shake. Maybe it's got 120 grams of carbs. I've already told you there's a threshold. So here's what happens. The pancreas, which is responsible for releasing insulin, every time you eat a carb, the pancreas goes, oh, okay, and does something. But if you keep punching it, right? You keep punching it, it gets exhausted.
Hmm.
So that's what that is. They're feeling themselves, they're burning themselves. They're feeling themselves, they're burning it. But when they eat the glucose and then they're burning it, the pancreas is like, what are you? I'm gonna stop doing this job. I'm getting exhausted. The
Yeah.
same things happen with the adrenal glands when you don't have thyroid hormone. The adrenal glands are trying to save you by shooting off cortisol, trying to get you out of bed. And then they go, I can't, I'm out. And then you get adrenal fatigue. So that's poking the bear is living a high carb life. You will end up with a 5.7, 6.0 HbA1c, even if you exercise every day.
Right.
And that's why they
Right.
don't get away with it on the back end. So they look good. And on that note, everyone listening, next time you see a woman or a man, you, oh, I wish I had his body. Check their blood work. Maybe you don't. Maybe
Right.
you
So
actually want the
interesting.
body of the person that's a little bit, got a little bit of meat on them. Trust me, a lot of these athletes and people that have perfect bodies are inflamed messes when it comes to the blood work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we have to look at how someone achieved a thing. That athlete body and how he achieved it was detrimental. You can achieve it in another way. And that's what
Yeah.
athletes are learning. And they're learning that through, Mark Sisson's work on primal endurance, changing that whole paradigm. In fact, the guy, Timothy Noakes, wrote a book years ago called was it not Born to Run? Something where basically his whole thing back 20 years ago was glucose is the fuel. Got to glucose, for runners, you got to gluc up, you eat the, pasta and the breads. Then he gets type 2 diabetes. And he's like, hold up. And he comes out publicly and is like, oh my God, I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. And
Wow.
he got so much heat for this. I mean, his colleagues at the universities in South Africa, he's famous for it. Noakes is his last name, Timothy Noakes. And he came out and was like, this is all wrong, you guys. This is the wrong paradigm. I thought that it was glucose. It's not. And here we are. So even a fit, athletic person can become diabetic, not look like it. And again, that's the thing. You can't judge what someone looks like because you don't know what the blood work is.
Yeah, yeah. And when
Yeah.
you were exercising, that huge morning routine, were you
Yeah.
also like in a massive calorie deficit as well?
Yes, and I think it was really just not enough fat. So I'd have like I'd restrict and then I'd kind of binge, you know what I mean, a little. And then I felt like I'd have to go work out even more. It was working, but it was stressful, and it felt like if I didn't do all those things every day, then I would it would take 5 steps backwards. And that's
Yeah.
the thing I want people to get out of their mind. When you get fat adapted, you don't have to do that because you are not 2 steps forward, 5 steps backwards. You're just, I'm here, I'm good. And if I just eat right, 80% of your body composition is diet. So if
Yeah.
you are, but primal paleo, I'd say, is the one I would adopt if you don't want to work out, if you want less stressful workouts, if you'd like to just take a walk, lift some dumb weights, and have that be the thing that does it, you
Hmm.
can do that, but you can't do it when you're a carb addict.
Right. And just to dial back a bit with the definition of primal paleo, what are
Yeah.
the foundations of that?
So this is the way we look at it. So we as humans, some people don't know this, we have been evolving for 2.5 million years. We only started to do agriculture and farming around 10,000 years ago. You and me, our genetic makeup is the exact same as it was of a hunter-gatherer ancestor 50,000 years ago. Okay. The Bible's only 5,000, 4,000 years old or something like that. So we're talking like a really long time. By the way, 50,000 years ago, they were communicating like us. Okay. These are
Hmm.
not like, the like whatever you see in some cartoon. So they have the same genetic makeup as us. And it hasn't changed. What has changed? Well, autoimmune disorders and things like that started to come on the scene, meaning paleontologists and archaeologists only saw it in the record around 10,000 years ago when people started farming, eating grains, and all of that stuff. Then the diseases of modern society showed up. We had high stature. You look at skulls of hunter-gatherer ancestors from 60,000 years ago, teeth perfect, head perfect, and then you look at one of a farmer 10,000 years ago, corroded. It's because of the grains. It's because of the difference in diet. So
Hmm.
we as humans have our own prescriptive DNA that tells us what we need, right? We need sunlight, air, like all these things, and a certain dietary paradigm, a certain list of foods. Everyone's going to be individual, right? I might have a thing with tomatoes that I can't eat, right? We have individual stuff, but
Yeah.
basically, it's plants, animals, anything with a parent, plants, animals, good fats. What are good fats? Butter, ghee, coconut oil, olive oil, beef tallow, duck tallow, any of that stuff. And then we want to go with low glycemic fruits, but all fruits are available. You just need to watch carbs. So berries are going to be better than bananas. But eat the banana if you need the banana. It's just that those are the lower carb fruits. And it's the elimination of grains, beans, legumes, and dairy, except for
Okay.
maybe full fat dairy, like heavy whipping cream. But about 65% of the population of the world has an issue with dairy.
Hmm.
So that's a big issue. If you have Scandinavian heritage, you might be one of the lucky ones who can actually really tolerate it quite well. That has been seen in the archaeological record too. So it's really plants, animals, good fats, and the seeds and elimination of grains, beans, legumes. And then people are like, what am I gonna eat? Because grains is rice, grains is corn, grains is wheat,
Yeah.
grains is flour. Now, luckily, there are grain-free things out there. There are grain-free breads, grain-free pizzas. Against the Grain is a company that makes them. I would still say that if you're starting the journey, don't go for the fake stuff first, right? Like the the pizza that's not grain-free. Like
Right.
just get used to that and then treat yourself to something like that. So there are great options now. And so it's like what I said about that horse. You're not going to feed a cow a steak. Definitely not. That would be really rude. But you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? And so we have our own DNA too, and it goes off track when you go against it. Seed oils are very offensive. And so even if it's just changing the oils in your house, don't use corn oil, don't use canola oil, don't use sunflower oil, just switch it to avocado oil, olive oil, anything, beef fat is better. And getting back to again, what our ancestors would have found and ate. Now, there are people that live by the paradigm of I do seasonal eating. What's in season around me? Look, there's lots of those things. It's like with flow living, like you were talking about with the
Mhm.
the periods, there's all sorts of different modalities to adopt. You could try that. I don't go for it because if I want a watermelon in January, I'm going to eat the fucking watermelon. You know what I mean? Like I don't care.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but there's something to that, like winter root vegetables, maybe more protein and fat, more of a keto paradigm in winter because there's less activity. You're kind of storing in a little bit, keeping warm. And then, summer and spring, right? Fruits and you know what I mean? But if you live in Hawaii or you live somewhere like I do in California where you get this stuff all the time, I don't I don't have a subscribed thing like seasonal eating. I just I eat also what I crave. It's hard to gauge cravings when you are not fat adapted. So you get fat adapted first, and then you realize that the craving's real, right? You know, like
Mhm.
craving donuts isn't necessary. I mean, you might be craving some glucose and then make a better choice with fruit. But like usually with cravings, like I'll just be like, I need cucumbers, or like I hate chicken one week and then next week I'm obsessed with chicken. I eat the chicken. I just go
Mhm.
with like my body needs chicken right now. Oh, it turns like I need a burger every day for the next 3 days. So it becomes kind of fun because then you sort of are more intuitive about what you need. And then if something crappy comes up, you know of a good substitution or what you might like, hey, maybe my body just needs glucose, you know, and
Yeah.
I need some kind of sugar. And which form am I going to give it? An apple? You know, maybe that's the better choice than the Twinkie, of course. Back to, so I was eating a low carb, low fat paradigm over exercising. Then I changed it to a paleo paradigm and then exercising at that fat burning rate and only once or twice a week doing like a sprint session, which by the way is
Right.
way more
Okay.
fun. Who wants to run on a treadmill for 30 minutes? Kill me. Kill me.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I, I know people love it, but I'm like, I don't, and also look at all the injuries that come from the chronic cardio too. You know,
Yeah.
people running every day. Hot yoga's not great, guys. I did hot yoga 5 days a week because I thought that'll burn it. That
Hmm.
that'll sizzle, sweat it off of me. It's glycolytic. It is. It also is just it's an adrenal puncher. So any 2, 3 level or hot yoga is not great while you're trying. It's hard at first to go slower, Sarani. It feels weird because you're in the
Yeah.
like, I gotta do it. But now my hikes are like so enjoyable with my friends because we're just chilling and we're
Yeah.
fat.
Yeah.
We're burning fat every minute, not glucose.
Right.
And that's what you
Yeah.
just need to know. If you switch and understand, you're actually going to burn more fat if you slow down. It seems counterintuitive. I hope this is making sense.
It is making sense. And I think like it's just, I think probably, I mean, it's a lot for someone to take in if they've
Yeah.
just, I have a couple of friends who go through this pattern of, they lose weight very quickly, they've got a goal. And, for them, it's just like starvation is the only way, for like me to just do a heavy calorie deficit. And, but then they that goal may be reached, or they reach that day, they go on their vacation, and then they gain it all back in like a few days or a week, and it's like that doesn't need to happen if you build it up right. If you're building up and you're eating more and just trying to educate on that level, which seems simple once you're in it. Now I'm heavily in the algorithm, listening to people like
Hmm.
yourself, and know a lot about like being fat adapted and
Yeah.
the sugar burner, fat burner. And the biggest thing for me, which I try and tell friends that are not in that world, is the protein. Is like no one is eating enough protein, like
And I'm glad you even gave me the reminder today. I probably need
yeah.
to take a look at it again.
It's like hard work, but at the same time it's so true with the cravings, because I've been doing that consciously, just more prioritizing if I'm going to count protein and fiber, and then the carbs
Hmm.
and the fat sort of make it in there. If I'll have an avocado, that's fat, but there's fiber. So I'll it'll end up working out well if I'm just more conscious about the protein and the fiber. But the sugar cravings like disappear. It's like amazing. I'm like trying to save these cookies that I got from London, my favorite, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna have that on the day that I really, this day, I'm gonna reward myself. And then I'm like, I don't feel like it. I
Yeah, you
want to
get there
like
and you're like,
wait.
no, I don't want it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And hey, look, I've been doing this a long time. Has there been a moment where like I ate donuts one day and then the next night I was like, I need another donut, and then I went and got
Right.
one, and then the third day I was like, hey, what's going on here? You're going right back down this train, right? So look, I mean, we're all susceptible to it.
Of course.
Our brains are looking to be, pleasure and reward.
And dopamine is important, I would say, like, because if you just are just good all the time, then there will be it's a slippery slope, and you will fall off that fall off that wagon. But
You'll
I
fall
feel,
off
yeah.
eventually, yeah. What else can I say about there's so much to say on this. I mean, I feel like I could talk about this for days. Obviously, I wrote a book on part of it. You read some of these books and you look at like the health stuff and you feel like you have to have the rainbow of the grocery store, garden section, like in your every plate has to be 15,000 colors. And then what
Mm.
you do, you end up wasting food. I've been there. You buy all the things. You're like, I'm going to make a salad with 15 things so that my salad is like the best. Okay. Stop right there. Just look at your week. You can do 1 day bok choy, 1 day, like, you know what I mean? Let's look at your week. How's your week and your month looking? Is it colorful
Right.
enough? Because I used to waste a lot of food. And also, every meal doesn't need to have all three different things. You don't need to have protein, fat, and carbs for every single meal. There are days
Mm-hmm.
when I just eat meat. I mean, literally. There's days where like you know what I mean? I just switch it up. You can have meat at one meal and then a salad at the next. It's okay. How's your day looking? So I think
Right.
that that's another misconception. I don't know if that you've gotten
Ah,
sucked into
that's
that before,
interesting for
but you
me.
know, you
Yeah,
feel like, and
yeah.
then you waste food and you're like, oh my God, these vegetables are going bad.
I would say that, yeah, I'm pretty conscious if I'm having the meal, apart from, if the protein part where I'm just like protein. But then, if with lunch, like, okay, if it's a salad, I've got my fiber, I've got my protein, I've got my
Mhm.
fat. Like, I'm usually thinking about that, not necessarily counting, but
Right. No.
yeah, yeah,
And I would say to get out of the counting, like I learn initially the foods you eat and what their carb content is, so you
right,
kind of know. If it helps you to track macros, like there are people that are like, the only way I can do it is if I track it. I hate it. I don't have time for that. I really
right.
don't. So, and I would like to impart on everyone to get a little bit more intuitive with it, learn a little bit stuff up front so you know that that potato is that many carbs and don't worry about specific numbers. And then the other
Hmm.
thing too is get off your freaking scale, everybody. Stop. And my argument for this is you know what your body is like. You're naked every day at a certain point. You pull on your underwear, you know if they're tight, you know if they're
Yeah,
slim. You don't need to go disappoint yourself. Don't self-sabotage yourself by looking at that number. I suffered greatly with hypothyroidism. I gained so much weight. It was horrible. I could cry right now thinking about it. Let me tell you how bad it was. I have a pair of jeans in my closet right now. When I was hypothyroid and so fat, I couldn't even pull one of the legs past my calf. It was like I
right.
was putting on an 11-year-old's jeans.
Wow.
I didn't go on that scale. I didn't put on those jeans until years later. I was like, hold on a minute. I think I feel it. And I
Hmm.
slipped them right back on. I didn't need the
Yeah,
scale to tell me that.
right,
So,
right.
so when you're on this journey, especially if it's fat burning or weight loss, please don't trip up yourself. I mean, I know for some people it helps to see the weight, but let me just say this. You could poop out 2 pounds, guys. Okay. So, like, what are you gauging? And it's not weight, it's body percentage fat. That is what you want to track. So, anyone really curious about this, there's a ABC show that a friend of mine, Abel James, he wrote a book called The Wild Diet. And he was one of the coaches on it. And it was a show called My Diet is Better Than Yours. And they had these trainers with their people, and they were like, let's compete and see whose diet's better. Guess who really won that? My friend Abel's guy, because he put him on a fat primal paradigm. The guy had a neck injury. He couldn't even really exercise. He lost 20% body fat. Now, the weight went down, but the weight wasn't as great as the woman next to him who was on the carb, like the bad paradigm. You just, starve yourself, don't drink water for 3 days, whatever, to affect the scale.
Right.
That's some fake ass shit. That's some fake ass
Yes.
weight loss. That's why those people get fat right away because it's not sustainable. That's the kind of stuff you and I were doing and we didn't know what we were doing. That's what
Yeah.
they're doing. So you can achieve, so the weight, the number is not what you want. Get yourself a scale that measures body fat percentage. That's
Right.
really what you're looking at. And that's the
Yeah.
health because a body that's 180 pounds with high body percentage fat versus a body 180 pounds with low, it's a different look. Same weight.
Yeah.
So don't trip yourself up. Like you start to lift weights, you're like, wait, why am I gaining weight? Relax. It's just muscle. What's the body fat doing? Because I guarantee you the body fat percentage is like going down.
Yeah.
So people are misgauging their diagnostic tools, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think you said get off the scale. I have a scale, I have a smart scale. And the thing is like now because I my goals are a little bit different, it's not about just losing that number. It's about I want to gain that muscle number. And I'm
Same
not
here. And,
really
and I look
sure.
at mine too because of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not really sure how accurate it is. I know probably not a perfect science, but I have seen like where I'm going, like the number, overall number is going down, the fat number is going down, the muscle is going up, the protein,
Mhm.
whatever, however they measure protein, apparently. My age has gone down, which is like not sure how
There you
they
go.
message that, that
Right.
they measure that, but
And then it
metabolic
becomes
age.
kind of fun because then you're at a
Yeah.
point where you're already at a certain place and now you're just trying to tweak and enhance.
Tweak,
And then it's
yeah.
fun. So I don't mind looking at the scale now because
Right.
whatever. But I also know that let's say I let's say I injured my ankle and I don't know, I got a little chunky because I couldn't extra whatever. I probably wouldn't get on the scale because I'd be like, I know my body, like don't disappoint
Right.
yourself. Like wait a few
Yeah.
days and then get back on it. Make sure you're at your set point. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. We you know, went on a holiday, indulged, whatever. Was curious to see what the damage was, and I actually had lost the number, like the lost weight, which I was surprised about, but not as I was more disappointed when it was expected that I lost the muscle. So, and like, you know, the numbers, even though I lost the weight, a lot of people will be like elated by that. I was quite like, you know, oh, well, you know, you don't use it, you lose it. So gotta just get back and get on the weights. And you feel it as well. You do
Yeah.
feel it. So,
And you don't want to
um,
be skinny fat.
right, right,
Because
exactly.
I mean I've been in that situation, right? It's like you fit in all the clothes, your weight's good, but you're kind of sloppy. Look at, like out of clothes,
Yeah.
you're a little sloppy. And again, it's a higher body for fat percentage, and it's just not as we want to become as metabolically flexible as possible. So that, and the way to do that is through a primal pair, get off the sugar burning train. And then from there, it's like I feel like you're supportive. You have a bad week and so you can lose weight on a vacation. Okay, you lost the muscle, but you didn't come back like, oh, 10 pounds, like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
the other thing too is um, it's interesting that vacation is a thing where people are like, I'm gonna go nuts. Right?
Hmm.
Like vacations are a thing where people are like, I can't wait. I'm gonna go to town, I'm gonna stuff myself and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Like, enjoy yourself, but just take a look at that mindset because I don't have it anymore only because I feel good. I still would probably indulge if I'm somewhere, I'm in Italy, I'm going to eat the pasta. Like, I'm probably
Right.
gonna have a dessert that's I don't get here. I'm going to do it if I want it. But I also know myself now where like I wouldn't just go nuts and blow
Go
myself out.
nuts, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
because you have
probably
a level of like newfound self-respect and joy in this new body. And also, as you know, like we talked about with the palate, you almost kind of can't at a certain point go to the old place. So yeah, I would just take a look at that because a lot of people just go on vacation and it's all they do is just like overindulge in, alcohol and all this kind of stuff. And again, like, hey, no judgment on it, go to town. But
yeah.
you get a little bit better at it. And
Yeah, and I think that was the case with me, you know, being in this sort of recent journey, like a few 3 months, going on this week vacation, being more conscious, even on holiday. I mean, I was in Spain, so there's amazing food options, you know, lots of
ah,
seafood. So I'm like, oh yes, this big plate of octopus. Like I'm gonna like go to
oh, I
town on
love
that. That's
octopus.
gonna hit my protein goals. And so I think like that helped. And we walked a lot, like, you know, 20,000 steps a day. That sort of all measured up to me losing, but you know, I wasn't doing the weight part. Like, so that was, you know, everything made sense, but it wasn't as bad as it would have been if, you know, 10 years ago and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go to town because I'm in
Right, it's
this new
more
country.
measured.
Yeah.
It's like a measured debauchery,
Yeah. Yes.
and I'm all for some debauchery. Enjoy your life.
Yeah, measured enjoyment.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this has been super great. I know that we've talked longer than we were supposed to, and this has been super insightful. Elle, thanks so much for sharing your valuable insights and expertise with us today.
Thank
And
you.
we didn't get to really dive into your books, but the listeners who want to dive into everything that we talked about, most of what you were talking about is in the paleo-thyroid solution that's behind
Yeah,
you,
if
right?
you don't have a thyroid problem or you don't think you have a thyroid problem, this is not necessarily your end all be all paleo book. If you would like to
Right,
learn about paleo-primal, I suggest going back to Mark Sisson's best-selling book, The Primal Blueprint. It's in its fourth or fifth edition at this point. If you
right.
want like a full-on foray into paleo-primal living, then I would go get that book. If you have thyroid problems, just come find me. But elleruss.com is my website. And I've got free stuff. I've got a free thyroid guide. I have a book on confidence as well. I'm a confidence expert. I've got a free confidence workbook. If you want to hear more about me talking really about thyroid, I mean, I've got a master class, a course, and also just free interviews out there. So lots of free information. Yeah, also too, aside from Mark Sisson's book, if you learn better from hearing someone talk, just Google interviews with Mark Sisson and just Mark Sisson primal interview, and stuff might come up from 7, 8 years ago. Listen to it.
Yeah.
He's really great at describing this, and he is my mentor and pretty much taught me everything I know about it. And he's sort of like, that's a great resource, and there's tons of interviews out, and he's so good at relaying the information. The other resource would be Brad Kearns, who is Mark Sisson's co-writer on a lot of these books. bradkearns.com. Mark's doesn't really have a website. Primal Kitchen is his website. But those are some resources there, especially for the dudes, but in general, paleo primal, like what is it? Those are the
Yeah.
deep
Yeah.
dives. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, definitely everyone go check that out. Again, elleruss.com is the website for more free information and tips. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to Holistic Health Habits for more episodes featuring experts in the field. Until next time, I'm Surani Fernando. Take care and stay healthy.